Hey everyone, this is Parthi from Letterdrop. Welcome to another episode of our podcast where we talk to go-to-marketing leaders on how to approach GTM differently. The market's evolving and the playbooks from the past decade aren't going to be working quite as well in the future. And so that's why we talk to folks who are thinking about how things are changing and how you might want to adapt your go-to-market strategy as well. With that note, I noticed this LinkedIn post on my feed from Shachar Orren, who's joining us. She is the CRO and CMO at a company called Exco, based out of New York. And she was talking a lot about how marketing has a brand problem. And I thought that was just fascinating, which is why I reached out and I'm really glad to have her today. Shahar, do you want to just maybe briefly tell folks like who you are and a little bit about Exco, and we can jump in from there.
Of course. Thanks, Parthi. So I'm Shahar. I am the Chief Marketing and Revenue Officer at Exco, and we are a video platform for publishers. We work with some of the biggest media groups globally, the likes of New York Post and the Arena Group and NASDAQ and others, supporting everything that they need to run video content and revenue on their sites. And I've been doing this for 10 years, and I started from, kind of the more creative areas of the business into marketing. And a year ago, started managing our revenue and sales operations as well. So this is definitely a topic that I've been dealing with quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm very excited to dive into that. So maybe let's start with the LinkedIn post that initiated this conversation, right? So it sounds like you had a group of sort of like marketers or revenue folks in your office in Tel Aviv about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And the topic of conversation was around how marketing perhaps has a brand problem. I mean, like we've seen this, right? Like lots of layoffs last year as the market sort of turned south. A lot of folks in marketing couldn't necessarily communicate their value when push came to shove to their CEO, to their board, to sales. And so companies obviously are just going to be like, cool, like we need to like do it a riff. We need to cut costs. And I don't understand how this thing is contributing to revenue. And so we're just going to get rid of it for now until things are better. Would love to understand what you learned from that conversation with folks and why you think marketing has a brand problem today with the sales and execs that we mentioned.
So the conversation that we hosted in our office started from these three major companies that at the end of last year announced that they were eliminating the CMO role. So not just letting someone go, but eliminating the role entirely and just taking the marketing function under one of the other executives in the C-suite. So it's UPS, Etsy, and Walgreens. But the role of the CMO has essentially been under a lot of scrutiny in the last decade, I would say. And it's known to be the shortest tenure in the C-suite. It's somewhere between 18 months to 3 years, but much shorter than the average C-level executive, which is more like 5 or 7 years. And I participated in the last few months in New York in another really interesting discussion that dealt with why are there so few marketers on the boards of the Fortune? So out of the Fortune 1000 companies, thousands of board members, right? Only 26 of them are marketers, which was absolutely crazy for me to hear. And, it's a lot about the ambiguity of this role, the fact that, as you said, it's hard for CEOs to understand. Not a lot of CEOs are marketers. They're either tech people or business people. And this thing, sounds to them more like a cost center than it is a profit center. And that was a lot of what came up from that discussion that we hosted in our office, is that a lot of the reason that that happens is many marketers don't have clear revenue KPIs that impact their compensation. In fact, we did a survey of this marketers group that this discussion was a part of, and almost 50% of the people in the group, these are the leading marketers in Israel specifically, said that they don't have revenue KPIs impacting their comp. And so that really is where this problem stems from. And, that was one of the things that came up in those discussions is that marketing has a branding problem. It's funny. That's what we do. We brand the products that we sell and the companies that we work for, but marketing itself is not branded in a way where it's very clear what it is and why I should pay for it.
I think that's fascinating that over half of those sort of like leading marketing roles were not tied to a revenue metric, because I feel like it's very in vogue right now to make sure that your CMO has. I was talking to the CMO of a company doing probably like 70, 80 million top line, and he said 25% of my comp is purely just pipeline. And I was like, that's amazing. That's really good. You're very well aligned with what the company needs at any point in time. And it's surprisingly uncommon, to your point over there. In terms of like, I feel like a lot of marketers are also like maybe hesitant though. It's not just like they don't have that number, but a lot of people are also hesitant to take on that ownership. Like, was that something you observed during your conversation?
So I think you would really hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of this, is because of, we mentioned CEOs that don't necessarily understand and they don't come from this background and so on. But a lot of the responsibility sits on us marketers ourselves is, we're not quick to adopt these KPIs because, that could impact our compensation and it could impact it positively or negatively. And it is, it's now that my amazing team is super aligned with our amazing sales team and they work so well together, it's easy for me to sit here and say, oh, everyone should do that. But it took us years to get there. And I think specifically, in B2B, where there's a lot of work on brand and there's a lot of things that are kind of done by marketing behind the scenes, and we build a lot of PowerPoints and and slides and so on. It's sometimes it really does feel like, do we have enough impact on the sales? The pipeline, maybe we do, but everything that happens after that, do we have enough impact on it to really take on that KPI and have it impact how we're compensated, and not just compensated, how we're measured, how our success is being looked at. And I totally can understand where that concern or that fear to take that on comes from, because so much happens after, marketing ends their work and sales begins. But the truth of the matter is, if you don't do that, and again, we were there a few years ago, and it was always hearing those, the classic marketing cliches of, we're creating all these decks and nobody's using them, or, we just need more and more and more things and it's never enough. And the lack of alignment was just very, very frustrating for both sides. But also it leads to marketers just not being necessary anymore. And so I think even though it's hard and even though it can seem like we don't have all the impact, it's mandatory. And that was a lot of the conclusion that came from the discussion, is marketers have to speak, that revenue language, and they have to be able to do more than just marketing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, because in some ways, marketing is essentially one to many sales, if you think about it.
Yeah.
If you look at like D2C brands, for example, there is no sales function. It is marketing that is directly creating
It's the
revenue.
sales team essentially. Yeah.
Exactly. It's easier there for them just because it's a transactional purchase, right? You add something to your cart, you check out, you buy something. It's very easy to track. You don't really have to talk to somebody. But yeah, like marketing is directly tied to revenue in those kinds of organizations. And so it's kind of crazy that it's not the same in B2B just because it's not the final touch point. And so I think to your point, this is why you're seeing an increasing number of sort of like CRO roles, which are thinking about the revenue engine from start to finish, all the way from marketing to sales to customer success, and just owning that sort of like life cycle of a dollar, essentially.
Right.
And the thing is, the vast majority of CROs don't come from marketing backgrounds. The vast majority of them, almost all of them actually
We're
have
saying
sales backgrounds. Yeah.
99.9%.
Yeah. I think Sixth Sense is an exception. You are the second person I've met actually,
Nice.
who's an exception to that role. And yeah, it's really interesting because obviously, if you put a CRO in place and their background is sales, I think what ends up happening is they start thinking about the entire revenue organization from a sales lens, which can definitely impact like the marketing team. You start thinking very short term. You
Yeah,
start thinking quarter by quarter, as opposed to like what's going to drive revenue a year from now.
right.
Is that something you've thought about, especially as somebody who's now like a both like CMO slash CRO? Like, how do you think about that?
So I often think about kind of how sales and marketing are different and how they can complement each other. So I think you're right. Sellers see more of like the short term win. And it's not that they're not strategic thinkers, they have to be. But they also have to, every client call, and I know this now because I am on client calls every day. And it's something I always say, like every marketer has to do. You know nothing about what your audience thinks about and what they care about until you're out there, like in the call. But every call is almost like you have to just get through that and win that and get through, everything that your client needs. And so you can't really be 15 steps ahead thinking about the brand and, the long-term piece and new products that are coming up, because can I sell this product to my client right now or not? If not, don't talk to me about it, because I'm accidentally going to bring it up and I can't. So they need to be very much in that mode, while marketers can think, I think they should always be 15 steps ahead and think about, the more strategic piece and how to kind of look at it more holistically. But then, as you also mentioned, marketers are traditionally behind the scenes. They're not on the sales calls, even, in, direct to consumer or business to consumer brands. They're not the ones that are necessarily speaking to clients or really meeting them. And so it's a little bit of an easier, like, they're hidden behind the screen and they don't need to really face the reality as it is. And so that kind of puts them at a disadvantage because they're not exposed. You can look at recorded conversations and you can hear from the salespeople exactly what the client said, but until you have led a sales call yourself and had to deal with the client asking you something you have no idea, what the answer is to, or having to explain something really complex or whatever it may be, you haven't really been able to help them. And so it only will work if the two groups really support each other and each kind of brings their unique set of skills into it. And I think to your point of not a lot of revenue teams are led by people who came from the marketing side, it's definitely different. And I think it's maybe leading more from narratives than from numbers, maybe, which is not necessarily better. It's just different. And it's thinking more about the audience, the story, how do you bring value to them in a unique way, which are the things that marketers think about every day. But, having to apply that in an actual sales call every day really helps you sharpen it to the point where it delivers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like every marketer, if their organization will allow it, should take some like at least like maybe some like low risk sales calls where you're okay with, okay, if we lost that deal, it's not the end of the world. Just because you want them to learn, you want to have them put them in the hot seat for a little bit and actually have them understand and build that empathy, not only for the sales team, but also with the customer. Like, why is this person actually talking to me? Like they're taking time out of their day to talk to a random vendor. It's not like people's first priority, obviously, but clearly they have some sort of problem if they care about this enough. And I think more marketers should put themselves in those shoes. To your point, I think the challenge with a lot of marketing is trying to figure out what is that balance between short term and long term. So at Letterdrop, for example, our marketer is metric on sales qualified opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So our AE has to say like, yes, this inbound or something that was kind of like an easy close for our BDR to get the meeting, but you could see that marketing had its impact.
Right.
That person actually turned into a qualified opportunity. And it's good in the sense that it keeps both of them reasonably aligned. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's bad in the sense that it also incentivizes very much month to month thinking. It's just like,
Right.
okay, we need this number next month. How do I run a short term campaign, a bursty campaign?
Yeah.
Maybe the economics of it don't even work out,
Right.
just to hit that number.
Right.
And I have to also remind them, like, cool, like we're doing this, but I just want to remind you that in 6 months from now, if you just are constantly looking towards the next month, 6 months from now, when all these numbers ramp up a little bit, you're just going to fail. And so there needs to be a balance between long term thinking and short term thinking.
Yeah.
Are there metrics or are there ways in which you've thought about, okay, how do I get the marketing team to balance both of those?
So definitely those are things we think about a lot. And again, it sounds like we figured it all out, but again, it took years to get to this point, and we are constantly optimizing and thinking, and our company changes and the market changes. But we do eventually measure marketing mostly on qualified opportunities. But there's also a component to it that is how much revenue did opportunities that stemmed from marketing end up bringing to the company, because you can't measure a whole department in the company based on something that is a step to something else. So we do want to see the eventual, the impact of it on the company's bottom line. And I think that really helped the entire team think about this differently. And so, it's not about like, let's just do a big SDR, BDR campaign and, get a lot of opportunities in, but eventually we will see that they were very small, and they, it's like very kind of long tail clients, and they didn't really make a huge impact on the company. So was it worthwhile, or should we have actually spent the majority of our time creating one opportunity that's going to be, really, really impactful? And that's how we started spending a lot of our time investing in events. The majority of our marketing budget specifically now goes to events. It's something that's very true to our industry. It's very much kind of a relationship driven industry. And so there's a lot of conferences. We are doing about 20 conferences a quarter, conferences and hosted events. And it's a lot. And that is because we want marketing to help the bigger opportunities come into the pipeline. And those happen not by cold emails or by inbound, but rather, again, for us, very different for every business. For us, those happen at those events. And sometimes, by the way, a recent realization we've come to, it's not even going to be us impacting a new opportunity being created, but rather there's an existing opportunity in the pipe, but we can help it move forward. Those bigger opportunities, longer sales cycles. So we're going to help get more people from that company that, can be our champions, or we're going to meet that company that's already an opportunity in the pipe, or we're going to meet them at various events or, points in the life cycle to really help that opportunity materialize. And those were realizations that came with time, and in really thinking, how do we help the revenue of the company and not just that number that could also not really be what matters.
I really like how you talk about accelerating the sales cycle. That's actually something that like we actually track and measure. I mean, we focus mostly on organic and content marketing at our company,
Yeah.
but we actually measure content accelerated pipeline. And then I think in your case, what you're referencing is essentially sort of like event marketing or field marketing influence pipeline, essentially, which is really interesting. If you can get that deal, whatever, maybe it's like a multiple six figures, like seven figures deal, and
Exactly.
you can reduce the sales cycle from many months, probably over a year, down by like a couple of months. That's definitely worthwhile and
Right.
has massive impact.
Right. And content that you mentioned is also part of it, right? Like, we got our marketing team to a point where everything that we do, to a certain extent, we can map its content, its relation to impact on sales and revenue. And so if we're producing a piece of content, we already know we're going to be promoting it in our emails to clients, or we're going to be talking about it in thought leadership at a conference, or we're, it's all related. We don't just do it in order to do it, which again, easier said than done. There were years in which we did because we didn't know better. And it's a lot, it's an exploration that every company has to go through. But now we're at a place where every activity that we invest in, we know how to paint that line of the impact that it's making. And it really was a big change for us.
Absolutely. In terms of what do you feel like you wish your average marketer knew about sales? What would your advice be to the average marketer in terms of like, hey, here's something you should learn from sales?
I wish they knew how hard it is. And I can also say that, in sales, just for sales to know about marketing. But I think a lot of times, there's kind of these generic teams that every company has run-ins with. It's like customer success and product, or sales and marketing, where they need to work a lot together, but they always are angry at each other or have these complaints at the other team. And it totally makes sense because it's frustrating. Like, why are they not using the materials that we spent so much time building? Or, but why did they show up late to this? Or why did they do that? Or why I gave them this amazing lead and it didn't close? And, or, the classic thing that we all hear, why did they not put it in Salesforce? And why is it not recorded? So there's a lot of that, but I think walk a mile in the other team's shoes. It's, you appreciate what they do. And this goes again, both ways, so much more. That's why I always say, like, go on that sales call. Selling is a really, really difficult because you're, in the battlefield. You need to win every call. And like you mentioned before, nobody wants to talk to a salesperson ever. Not me, not you, and not anyone else. And so it's a very difficult position to be in, and you need to be smart and technical, but also a really nice relationship driven person, and get your points across in a really concise way and drive it home and follow up and be really annoying by following up 100 times, but not too annoying. It's not easy, and marketing is not easy either. You need to, tell great stories, think of multiple audiences and how to kind of in a cohesive way tie it all into one brand, and constantly be creative. And there's so many things that go into each of the roles. I really think, be so nice if companies had that day where you each get to swap with someone else and do their role for a day, kind of really learn what it feels like. I think we would all do our job so much better. I need to
Yeah, I'm
take the
trying to
CFO
figure.
role for a day, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of companies do that with customer support.
Yeah.
They'll just have like an engineer on the team or a product person on the team, or like honestly, like even sometimes like a marketer on the team, like go to customer support.
Yeah.
It's probably less of like an issue if maybe like customer support is like maybe on that day like a little lackluster. I think
Right.
with sales, people get a little bit antsy about it. They're like, oh no, that could have been like new revenue close that we lost
Yeah.
because somebody untrained was in that position. But yeah, I agree with you. I wish that were the case.
Worth it. Worth it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Long term worth it. You have to like
Long term.
forego the short term
You need to
revenue.
pick the right deal that,
Yeah,
maybe take the call together. So there's always someone who did this more that can kind of save it, but just, yeah, be on the line, be responsible to answer the questions, feel the heat.
yeah, totally. Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about your sort of like how you got here and your background. So from my understanding, you went to school for film,
Mhm.
and then you were actually a journalist for a bit before you entered marketing through content and then into like broader like marketing and now CMO/CRO. Tell me about that entire story. Like, how did you go from place to place, and how has your opinion changed? Like, what did you learn along the way that you previously didn't believe in?
So as you said, I did come from like the more creative sides of the world. My dream was always to write and get paid for it. And I got to do that for almost 10 years as a journalist. So after film school, or even before film school, actually, I started writing. I wrote for the two biggest publications in Israel. And that's where, I started my career. And after 10 years doing this, I got to the point where I felt like there's only so much more that I can do. And the industry, I was working in print, actually, so not even in the digital space. And the industry, specifically in Israel, it's a very small industry, and it kind of was shrinking around me. And I was like, I'm too young and probably too ambitious to work in an industry that's kind of shrinking and slowly dying around me. But all I know to do is, I'm creative. I managed people. I was in my last role in media, I was deputy chief editor of a big culture and entertainment magazine in Israel. And I was like, I know all these things, but where else, in what other industry are they going to bring value? And this was 2013. So this was before every tech company had a content team and knew that content was a way to build business and so on. And I was lucky enough to find two entrepreneurs that were building technology for publishers. And joining them, I was able to bring the knowledge of what it is to work for a publisher, the pain points, the day to day, everything that I did for 10 years, and bring that, to a tech company and that was our mission and our goal from day one, was to build technologies that help publishers grow their business. So in the beginning, we built solutions that were more on the content and interactive content side. And about 5 years ago, we got into video. So it's still, related to the media industry that I came from. It's still creative, and obviously video, it's the number one most consumed content in the world today. And the ability to kind of help publishers make the most out of their video content, but also grow their business with it, is something that is a mission that really has been driving us and why we do what we do. And my role within the company started more on the creative side. So in the beginning, again, our product was more content oriented, so that was a lot of what I did, and building content strategies for the big clients that we were working with. But as it evolved, it kind of went into marketing. And, I guess marketing is that kind of link between the creative side and the business side. And I think I found myself, in the years leading marketing for Exco, more drawn to that business side because of everything we just talked about. Unless you're drawn into it, and unless you really are there with, the business side, you're not really doing your job well. And I think the more I realized that, I found myself spending more and more of my time, with the business side and with the revenue side of the business, where it just eventually made sense to make that full transition. But it's definitely not, the standard trajectory. Sometimes people ask, what's your career trajectory going? That's not something anyone can learn from. It's not, something that I would recommend someone to do. Go be a journalist if you want to end up leading revenue operations for a tech company. But yeah, I think it does give me and us kind of a unique perspective into the business, that for us being, in a creative space and video, but also we're monetizing creativity, we're monetizing video. It marries those two sides kind of the way it marries them within my skills or my role. So it makes sense.
What's a very tactical way in which you feel like you've tried to do both of those, apply creativity to revenue, or vice versa, like apply revenue to something that you would traditionally think as like very creative?
I think our marketing team would say that every time they come with a really creative idea to me, my first question is, but how does it help us? Which I guess is kind of that revenue oriented or like bottom line oriented thinking apply to creativity. And sometimes it hurts me that I am that person, or I need to be that person, because in my past life, just doing creative, the creative roles, let's fly together with that thought, and, and imagine where it could go. And we could take over Times Square and do these posters and, and do this. But now I'm much more like, how does it help us? Why do we have why should we spend money on it? So I think I definitely apply more of that business thinking to marketing, which may be kind of a buzzkill sometimes, but it helps us reach, the right activities that really make a difference and, move the needle for us. I think on the business side, it really is thinking of the audience first and thinking what moves them. So it may be more, not necessarily creativity, but more of like the way marketers think, like audience first. Who are you talking to? What do they care about right now? What are they thinking about? And how can you tell a story to them? Because, as I said before, nobody wants to be sold to. Nobody wants to speak to salespeople. Nobody even has the word sales in their title anymore, because then nobody would answer their emails ever again, and nobody would connect with them on LinkedIn anymore. So how do you, but everyone wants to hear a story. That's kind of the, fundamental thing that humans are looking for. And so how do you make selling a story is really, I guess, where that creative side of my brain brings impact.
Yeah, you're completely right there. I think people almost, when they start being sold to, their brain, there's something in their brain almost clicks and they just start ignoring. It applies at all levels. It applies at the marketing level, it applies at the sales level. Even if you're in a sales conversation, if you look at like bestsellers, they have like a very clear agenda. They're just saying like, hey, like this is all about helping you. Like you're taking your time. I want to just help you, and you do very good discovery. You understand like what their problems are, and then you say like, okay, here are solutions for you. I'm trying to be like fairly unbiased here and say like, okay, like here's all the things you could do. I think you should maybe choose our solution because it's unique or it's different for these reasons. But the thing you don't want to do is like be a pushy salesperson. And so the same thing applies in marketing as well, where if all you do is just talk about your product and like what you're selling and how great it is, people start turning a blind eye towards you. It's
Nobody
better
cares
for you to actually,
about,
yeah,
about your features. It's,
right,
yeah.
right. Instead, you have to like sort of encompass it within a broader narrative. How is the industry changing? How did a customer or somebody go from point A to point B? It's like telling the sort of like Star Wars story, like you're Luke Skywalker and our tool is just a lightsaber for you or something along those lines. So I really like
And
that.
use this. This is good.
um, Amazing. So finally, let's leave with a parting thought over here. You're talking to a marketer who aspires to be a CMO or a CRO, right? What advice would you give them? Like what can they start tactically doing every day today so that they are aligned with the business, that so that sales, their CEO, their board understand the value that they're providing to the business? What is your one piece of advice for them?
I think it's ask yourself, and this could be, you could be the most junior person in the company, or you could be in a senior role, but ask yourself, how does this company make money? And how can I help impact that way that the company makes money? It sounds cold, but it could be through amazing creativity or, a lot of different ways. But you have to be able to paint that clear path between what you do. And when I say, the company makes money, it's also obvious that if the company makes money, they brought value to their customers. So before even that, how do we bring value to our customers? But, how do I impact the key things that the company cares about? If I don't know that and I can't be woken up in the middle of the night and say that in one sentence, maybe my role is not that crucial. And maybe at bigger, corporate companies, there are a lot of people that, they're not able to paint that path, and it's fine. But if you work for a startup, you have to know that. Otherwise, it's the same as those CMOs that their roles were eliminated. Someone's going to ask themselves, why am I paying this person so much money?
Absolutely. Shahar, it was a pleasure to have you. I'm really glad that we had this conversation. If anybody wants to find you, how should they reach out to you? Where can they find you online?
Available and easy to find person on any platform you could imagine, but anyone can hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to talk more about this and anything else.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure, Shahar. Looking forward to many more conversations. Maybe we hit episode 2 and talk about webinars at some point.
Yes, please. Oh my God. The rant will go on. Thank
Cool. Thank you so
you
much.
so much.